Family life of the royal creche is difficult for many people to understand, but I shall try to give you a capsule view of it. My father had only one real friend, I think. That was Count Hasmir Fenring, the genetic eunuch and one of the deadliest fighters in the Imperium. The Count, a dapper and ugly little man, brought a new slave concubine to my father one day, and I was dispatched by my mother to spy on the proceedings. All of us spied on my father, as a matter of self-protection. One of the slave concubines permitted my father, under the Bene Gesserit Guild agreement, could not, of course, bear a royal successor, but the intrigues were constant and oppressive in their similarity. We became adept, my mother and sisters and I, at avoiding subtle instruments of death. It may seem a dreadful thing to say, but I'm not at all sure my father was innocent in all these attempts. A royal family is not like other families. Here was a new slave concubine, then red-haired like my father, willowy and graceful. She had a dancer's muscles, and her training obviously had included neuro-enticement. My father looked at her for a long time as she postured unclothed before him. Finally, he said, "She is too beautiful. We will save her as a gift." You have no idea how much consternation this restraint created in the royal creche. Subtlety and self-control were, after all, the most deadly threats to us all. From In My Father's House by the Princess Irulan. Welcome to Reading Dune, a podcast where we read Dune by Frank Herbert and talk about it. If you're a Fremen or a first-time reader, this podcast is for you. My name is Caleb Pauls.
And I'm Evan Diaz.
And together, we're going to read some Dune.
Yeah, we are.
Yes, we are. Hold the phone, Evan. That was the longest quote of all time.
No, that was really long. In my book, it takes up a whole page, and I was confused.
You just open up and you're like, wait, the book, where is it?
That's the quote. And then we get over to the next page, and there's the little tail end of the quote.
And you're like, oh yeah, In My Father's House by the Princess Irulan. Oh, got it.
I had to flip the page when I started to see who was reading this. And that was, okay, it's Princess Irulan.
Oh, Princess. All right. But before we jump into the quote, because there's a lot we could untangle there. Favorite moments from Dune so far. Jack Dickinson wrote us at readingdune@gmail.com. We want to hear what your favorite moments from Dune so far are.
Yes.
I think I said that right. You can let us know. Send us a audio recording, a video, email us what you think. You can do so at readingdune@gmail.com. He says, Spice Lords, first-time reader, living in Oakland, California. Love the book, and your podcast is a great companion to it. It's awesome to see real-life reactions from Evan and get a seasoned Fremen interpretation from Caleb. Favorite moments from book one, no particular order, the Thopter ride to the Spice Factory, the dinner party, Jessica and Howard's 2 a.m. conversation. Frank Herbert is excellent at generating moments of high tension between 2 or 3 characters. I appreciate y'all. Stay spicy.
Yeah. Thanks, Jack. Good old Jack.
Frank Herbert does an excellent job of creating tension between 2 or 3 characters. And in this chapter, the 2 or 3 characters are Paul, Jessica, and the worm.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Jeez. I didn't think of it like that, but now that you say it.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of tension there. All right, but first, the quote. All right, let's just look at the difference between, and I don't have notes on this chapter, guys, so we're flying solo here. The difference between the Imperium and the Fremen. Okay, life inside the royal Frothaluches and life in the desert. So let's see. The things we know is that there's a Bene Gesserit Guild agreement that the Emperor cannot have a royal successor. So,
But he can't have a royal successor from a slave concubine.
yes, as of now, he has only daughters. There is nobody that can take the throne, who is a male who can be king.
Right. But even if a concubine gave him a male offspring, that male offspring could not be a royal successor.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know how many, like, you know how Lady Jessica was technically a slave concubine. Um, she was, even though she bore the royal successor.
Right. But I don't know. But maybe the rules are different with the emperor as opposed to just a lord.
That's true. The emperor is that's no laughing matter.
Right.
But it's just so funny how like they're saying that like everyone is out to kill each other all the time, and it's okay because that's just part of the royal family.
Yeah. And like, dude, you gotta watch out for your dad trying to murder you all the time.
It takes a toll on a woman.
Sucks.
But the biggest dangers to the royal family are subtlety and self-control. The ability to control yourself in and amongst the excess, to know not when to let your desires be fulfilled. So the opposite of the Baron. The Baron fulfills all of his desires. Real power, she is saying, is the ability to delay gratification, to say, no, I will not do this, which is kind of a Fremen axiom, right? Is that how long can you keep running and delay what you want to get something more? And we're about to see what life is like in the desert here in Paul and Jessica Run Through the Desert Part 2.
Right.
All right, so where did we leave off last time with Paul and Jessica, Evan?
They were they climbed into a kind of crevice fissure type thing, and they fell down a little cliff thing, and Jessica got buried in a bunch of sand, and Paul freaked out, and eventually he dug Jessica out, and then the backpack was they made some weird foamy crap and pushed the sand apart somehow. We talked about it, and I still have a hard time picturing what it looked like, but
They got the backpack.
they got the backpack out and they camped out, and they saw across a plain of desert, like another what's the word, escarpment,
Yeah.
like another thing of rock with what they thought were some plants, right?
Yes. They thought they saw plants out there in the desert.
And they were basically like, yeah, we got to run across this thing, but there's for sure going to be a worm, so we got to put a thumper out. That's the plan. Thumper, run at a weird cadence across the desert, and hopefully we can make it to the other side where maybe we'll find Fremen. Maybe will help us.
Maybe. Who knows? They just can't stay there.
Right.
So they put up the tent as the sun was coming up, as day was coming up, and night is about to happen now. So it's about time for them to make their journey across the dunes.
Let's
Bum,
do
bum,
it,
bum,
baby.
bum, 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 bum. So we get Paul standing outside of the still tent in the late afternoon, and he's just standing there. 2 chapters ago now, when last time he says that he had already learned silence, right, in the quote. By the age of 15, he'd already learned silence. He's in that mode right now. He is learning and being absorbed by all of this silence, which is probably great when you think of how much is happening in his head all the time.
Right.
It's probably really annoying to not be around silence because like his head's just doing all these crazy things with his prescience and seeing all these weird futures and doing all the future things all the time. It's probably nice just to do nothing.
True.
But he's standing out, looking over the dunes, and he has this thought. He says, what if there isn't one of the abandoned testing stations out there?
Ooh.
He wonders. What if there are no Fremen either? And the plants we saw were only accidents. Like we're about to cross this thing, and what if nothing happens?
Right.
he allows himself to go down that rabbit hole and probably look at those futures. Jessica wakes up and turns over and looks out at Paul, and she sees him there in a stance that looks just like Duke Leto, just like his dad. And he's like probably feeling that. I mean, he's now the Duke, so his probably shoulders are probably back now a little bit more. He's probably in that power stance that he's kind of been taught. And she all of a sudden feels a well of grief rise up within her, and she has to turn away. She adjusts her steel suit, refreshed herself with some of that brackish water. But this time it's from the tent's catch pocket, not her own. So the tent was out there collecting water that was rushing past it. It probably tastes a little bit better than back sweat. She slipped out to the sand and stretched the sleep from her muscles. Paul spoke without turning. I find myself enjoying the quiet here.
Which is a real Duke Leto move, you know, standing with your back turned. I find myself enjoying the quiet.
Yeah, just enjoying it.
Kind of regal vibes from Paul right here.
Oh, he's starting to step into some power. Like, we've already seen him do a lot of really cool stuff since getting into the desert, but now I feel like he's starting to become something, step in, like, feel his own skin out.
Yeah.
Right? Finally fit into his still suit. But Jessica thinks, oh, how his mind gears itself for the environment. She recalled a B'nai Gesserit axiom. The mind can go either direction under stress, towards positive or towards negative, on or off. Think of it as a spectrum whose extremes are unconscious at the negative end and hyper-conscious at the positive end. The way the mind will lean under stress is strongly influenced by training.
And you better believe I underlined that one, because I need some of that in my life. I need some hyper-consciousness, positivity when my mind comes under stress. And then, okay, another little bit of good juice. I think about my daughter, or like my kids, whatever future kids I may have.
Right.
Hopefully. And when it says the way the mind will lean under stress is strongly influenced by training. And I'm like, if you're a good parent, you can teach and train your child to lean positive under stress, which, to be perfectly honest, as a person, I was not trained to do. And sure as heck wish I had been trained to lean positive under stress, because things would look a lot differently now. So I'm like, I'm going to do whatever I can to train my children to lean positive.
Yeah, just don't train them to be the Quizrock Hatterack. Just don't go that far, and I think you're okay.
Well, I don't think I have the capacity to do that, but it's fine.
I believe in you, Evan. You could be a great dad.
Thanks, man.
The mind will lean under whichever way the mind will lean under stress is strongly influenced by training, especially as kids, right? We start to, when we do something wrong, we're like, either when we're shamed by our parents or told to do this or that, like those get wired into us at a very, very young age. And, you know, when things are repeated, we learn them. So it's cool to see Paul go super hyper conscious.
Right. And it's hard to unwire those mental things that are put into us as kids.
So Paul says, again, looking out at the desert, it could be a good life here. Which I think is so funny because everyone dreads coming to Arrakis. But that's the Duke Leto's dream for Paul.
Yeah.
Like, if Arrakis needs to be his home. He needs to have a good life here to survive. So I think this is really cool seeing the Duke, like his wish, starting to come more and more realized.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
Yep.
Jessica tried to see the desert through his eyes, seeking to encompass all the rigors this planet accepted as commonplace, wondering at all the possible futures Paul glimpsed. One could be alone out here, she thought, without fear of someone behind you, without fear of the hunter. Which I think is nice when that's a positive. When you're in the desert, you are alone.
Yeah, or at least you think you are.
Well, you and Shai Halud.
A little foreshadowing for the rest of the chapter.
All right. So Paul then gives her the binoculars and says, look out there. And they look and they see some like spiny growth, right? Low grasses, yellow greens. Like, holy cow, things are actually growing here. Like, that's what Kynes had always wanted. That's what Jessica had alluded to back at the dinner. Like, all of their dreams are possible. They're small right now, but they're possible.
Right.
So Paul then, right to business, I'll strike camp. And so he puts camp away.
Is that what strike camp means?
I think so.
I'm not a camper, so I don't.
Yeah, he went to put it all in the backpack again. He puts one on each shoulder and says, I'm not losing it this time. Not this time. Happens once. So they're watching the sun set, and they're starting to see the stars come out. She stared up at them, sensing Paul's movements as he came up behind her. The desert night focused upward with the feeling of lift toward the stars. The weight of the day receded. And they feel a breeze. Paul says, the first moon will be up soon. The pack's ready, and I've planted the thumper. And this is where Jessica goes, we could be lost forever in this hell place and know no one. Like, worst case scenario, besides being eaten by a worm, is this.
Yeah. And Jessica is starting to get a little dramatic.
It runs in the family.
I mean to say, like, she's getting more and more dramatic, which didn't seem at first to be a big trait of hers. She was always very logical, and I don't know. Maybe I'm making that up, but she seemed a little more calculated before, and now she's like, "We're gonna die in this hell place."
I think it's just like after all this time and all the constraints and everything they've been through mentally, like it was easier to be like more calculated, right? When you're on Caladan, because you're not worrying about everything else. Now you're literally worrying about everything.
Yeah.
So I think she's like, the training only goes so far. She's not a full Reverend Mother yet. She still has a ways to go in her training. So we're going to see how that works out. But she's now on Arrakis. All right. So the wind comes in. Smell that? Paul said. I can smell even through the filter, she said. Riches. But will it buy water? She pointed across the basin. There's no artificial lights across there. Fremen couldn't be hidden in a sitch behind these rocks, he said. So we're going across. We're going across the thing. They're still like ready to go. Kind of waiting. Paul says, I've planted the thumper in the deepest part of the crevasse. Whenever I light its candle, it will give us 30 minutes. 30 minutes? Before it starts calling a worm. Oh, yes. I'm ready to go, Jessica says. Right.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Got it, worm, yeah.
Right. Okay, we're moving. We got 30 minutes, and then we go. She looks back out, and she sees the night again. The night is a tunnel, she thought. A hole into tomorrow. And where to have a tomorrow? She shook her head. Why must I be so morbid? I was trained better than that.
That's what I'm saying. Right there. She agrees with me. She's being real dramatic right now.
Yes. Paul returned, took up the pack, led the way down to the first, spreading the dune where he stopped. He listened as his mother came up behind him. He heard soft progress and the cold, grain dribble of sound, the desert's own code spelling out its measure of safety. Right? So they get down now on the dunes. We must walk without rhythm, Paul said. And he called up the memory of the men walking in the sand. The one when they went to the spice factory and he like looked up and he saw those men walking and he was like, hey, those are Fremen. And they're like, no, they're not. Well, they're walking really funny. So he's remembering that moment. And he's like, okay, how did they do it?
Well, he's also looking at prescient memory. So like future memory.
Right. How have you done this in the future?
And then he's like, Watch, Mom. This is how the Fremen do it. She's like,
You're right.
you still haven't met Fremen, Paul. What are you talking about?
So he goes, step, drag, drag, step, step, wait, drag, step. And the muscles protested every unnatural movement that they made. So they keep going. Step, drag, drag, step, drag, step, wait, drag. And then you hear a lump, 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 lump. The thumpers went off. It's been 30 minutes.
Yee.
So they don't turn around. They keep going. Step, drag, step, step, drag, wait, drag, step, wait, drag, lump, 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 lump of the thumper. They move. Let's say again, wide shot, super wide shot over these giant dunes. You see the cresting of the moon on these ridges, and then with stars all around. A lump, lump, step, step, drag, and you see them move across the moonlit bowl. They step down and through the spilling of the dune. Step, drag, wait. The pea sand rolled around their feet. And all while their ears searched for that special hissing, the one they've heard before. The sound, when it came, started so low that their own dragging passage masked it. Step, step, drag, drag, wait, drag. But it grew louder and louder out of the west. Lump, 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 drummed the thumper. The hissing approached, spread across the night behind him. They turned their heads as they walked. They saw a mound of the coursing worm. Keep moving, Paul whispered. Don't look back. This reminds me of one of those moments whenever you're climbing something like really high. Like, whatever you do, just don't look down.
Right.
Just keep moving. You'll be fine. But the moment you realize like how far you've gone or anything else, it just gets really weird. Or like, okay, this is an old one. You've seen the movie Onward, the Pixar movie?
Yes.
Right. When they're doing they have to walk across the chasm or whatever. It's the that bridge, and it's like he's got the rope on him as he's walking, and as long as he has the rope, he's fine. But then the rope lets go, but he's still doing that leap of faith and doing the walk. It's that same like, don't look down, don't turn back, just keep going.
Right, but without the safety of Barley's rope.
Right. No, and this is pure trust on this one.
Yeah. Oh my God.
That was a weird thing to pull from, but yeah, it's that same leap of faith. Keep moving.
Yeah, I just love that moment where he's like, "You still got the rope, right?" And Bartley's holding the whole
Yep.
rope. Yeah, I got it. I got all of it.
I got it all. They moved on and on and on. Muscles aching, reaching in a state of mechanical aching that seemed to stretch out indefinitely. But Paul saw that the beckoning escarpment ahead of them climbed higher. They're getting closer.
Yes.
Jessica moved without concentrating, void of concentration. Right? She's not thinking anymore. It's just become these things. Aware that the pressure of her will alone kept her walking. Dryness ached in her mouth, but the sounds drove away all hopes of stopping. Lump, 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 lump. Renewed frenzy interrupted from the distant cliff, drowning out the thumper. Silence.
So this is like a worm just tearing up that fissure that they were at. Is that what's happening?
Yeah. So Paul put the thumper deep into it. So basically the worm would have to like not be able to get to it and just become pissed at it, and probably breaking things up to try to get there. Like he probably broke it all up and he finally got the thumper, and then it's just nothing. It's over. Their time is up. Now it's going to come after them.
Now that they're completely tired beyond
their
ability.
Completely tired beyond everything. And they're probably, probably halfway in between now.
Yeah.
They're like legit in the middle. If they there's the only way to go is to keep going forward. Faster, Paul whispers. She nodded, knowing he could not see the gesture but needed the action to tell herself it was necessary to demand more from their muscles that were already being taxed to the limits of this unnatural movement. Step, step, drag, 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 wait, step, step. The rock face of the safety ahead of them climbed into the stars. Paul saw the plain of flat sand stretching out at the base. He stepped onto it, stumbled in his fatigue, righted himself with an involuntary outthrust of the foot. Boom, boom! Resonant booming shook the sound around them. Paul lurched sideways 2 steps. Boom, boom! Drum sand, Jessica hissed. Paul recovered his balance. A sweeping glance took in the sand around him. The rock escarpment perhaps 200 meters away. Behind them, he heard the hissing, like wind, like a riptide where there's no water. Do the sound for me, Evan. Run! Jessica screamed. Paul, run! And they run. Boom, boom. This is the scene in the trailer. This is like the last scene in the trailer. Yeah. Right? Where they see the boom, right? And the sand goes everywhere. And then you see them just sprinting as fast as they can. Drums sounding boomed beneath their feet. They were out of it on a pea gravel for a time. Running was relief to the muscles and ached from the unfamiliar rhythmless use. It probably feels great to run on your muscles at this point. Just it knows this. But still, you're running in sand, so that's no fun.
And it's like terrifying. I can't imagine what drum sand would be like to run. It's like boom, 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 like every step that you take.
And you know that there's this thing behind you that is in search of rhythm. And you don't know how big it is either at this point in time. Jessica stumbled to her knees. All she could think of was the fatigue and the sound and the terror. Paul dragged her up. They ran on, hand in hand. A thin pole jutted from the sand ahead of them. They passed it. They saw another. Jessica's mind failed to register on the poles until they were passed. There was another wind-edged surface thrust up from another crack in the rock. Another rock. She felt it, though her feet, the shock of unresisting surface, gained new strength from her firmer footing. A deep crack stretched its vertical shadow upward into the cliff ahead of them. They sprinted for it, crowded into a narrow hole. Behind them, the sound of the worm's passage stopped. So they made it. They made it.
Yeah.
They had the drum sound, but they made it across. Whew. I mean, I'm sweating at this point in time. My hands are sweating. It's just, oh my gosh. Talk about the tension.
Right. That was tense.
All right.
That was proper tension.
So they're in this part of the crevasse here, looking out at the desert, where the dunes began, perhaps 50 meters away from the rock at the rock beach. A silver gray curve broached from the desert, sending rivers of sand and dust cascading all around. It lifted higher.
Is this like a worm poking out of the desert? Is that what we're
the worm is now coming up to effectively look at them. I don't know if a worm has eyes. Do worms have eyes?
I know regular worms don't, but I don't know if these do.
I don't think these do either. It'd be weird. But it's coming to look at them, right? So it's coming up, and there's like waterfalls of sand that's falling off of it, and everything's moving. It lifted higher, resolved its giant, questing mouth. It was round, a black hole with edges glistening in the moonlight. Do you know what's in those teeth? That's Chris knives, all in there. Just that's what
the trailer version was like. Hundreds of little barbs,
like
middle of the mouth. So like each one of those is like a.
Well, yeah, the Fremen probably find dead worms or kill worms somehow, and then take their teeth and make them into knives.
Right.
Yeah, and in the new trailer for the new movie, That's coming out in 2021. Cross fingers. Cross
Ooh.
fingers. It might come out
Please.
if we ever get it. Yeah, it looks like you know how whales have, what's it called?
Yeah.
Their teeth are like, it starts with a B. I'm losing what it's called. Please
Dude, I
comment.
don't know either, but I think we all know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Pretty sure,
to catch the plankton or whatever. Yeah, that's what it is, with the sand to catch whatever it's trying to catch that it eats.
or at least that's what it looks like from far enough away to see the worm. You know, if you got up closer, it would be like that Chris knife.
Yeah. Extra Toasty on Twitter just commented, it's called baleen, and you're right. That is what it's called. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. I hope you're feeling extra toasty today, and staying spicy.
Extra spicy. Extra toasty is extra spicy.
So we're looking dead smack into this worm's mouth. The mouth snaked towards a narrow crack where Paul and Jessica were huddled. It's coming after them. Cinnamon yelled in their nostrils. I don't know if like yell is a sound. What's like a smell version of that? It's like overpowering.
Right.
Moonlight flashed from its crystal teeth. Back and forth, the great mouth wove. Paul stilled its breathing. Jessica crouched, staring. It took intense concentration of her B'nai Gesserit training to put down the primal terrors, to subdue a race memory fear that threatened to fill her mind. So this is like the most human of human instincts that all humans all have in this terror, looking at this beast.
Dude.
But what did Paul feel? Paul felt elation. In some recent instant, he had crossed a time barrier into more unknown territory. He could sense that. He loves it. He loves not knowing. What is this new thing? He could sense the darkness ahead, nothing revealed to his inner eye. It was as though he took some step and plunged him into a well, as though the trough of wave with the future was invisible. The landscape had undergone a profound shifting. So we were in a valley, and in the valley he fell down a well of time. So he has no idea what's happening. And he loves it.
That's scary, man.
Instead of frightening him, the sensation of time darkness forced a hyper acceleration of all of his other senses, right? Because you can't just rely on your prescience. He found himself registering every available aspect of the thing that lifted him from the sand that was seeking him. The mouth was 80 meters in diameter, crystal teeth with curved shape of crysknives glinting around the rim, the bellow breath of cinnamon acids. The worm blotted out the moonlight as it brushed the rocks above them. Gosh. Paul pushed his mother further back. Cinnamon. The smell flooded across him. What does the worm have to do with the spice melange? He asked himself. He remembered Liet Khan's betraying a veiled reference to some association between the worm and the spice. So the worm and the spice are related, and Paul has yet to figure out how they're related, but they are.
Evan has also yet to figure out how.
You don't know either?
I mean,
no guesses?
At this point, my guess is that spice is worm poop.
Okay, great guess. I love it. Keep them coming.
Idea, man. Your face tells me I'm wrong, but I'm just gonna go with worm poop.
I mean, you might, yeah. Rumors, right? We'll do on to like I won't tell you no. I'm just, rumors.
I'm embarrassed that I just said worm poop on our podcast.
It's okay. People listening to this podcast want to talk about worm poop. Let me tell you. If anybody wants to do it, it's people that read Dune.
My favorite scene is worm poop when Evan said worm poop. It's not in the book. It's in your podcast, but he said worm poop. So that's my favorite scene. Stay spicy.
Stay spicy, y'all. Stay spicy. All right. So worm is coming at boom. It was like a peal of dry thunder coming from the right. Boom. The worm drew back onto the sand and lay there momentarily, its crystal teeth weaving in the moon flash. Lump, 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 lump. Lump, lump. You know what that sound is, Evan? That's the sound of
Another thumper.
another thumper. Somebody placed a thumper out there. You know what that means, right?
Fremy boys.
Somebody's out there. They found somebody, or somebody's there. They gotta find him. A shudder passed through the worm. It can't not go to the thumper. It needs to go to the thumper. It drew farther away from the sand. Only a mounded upper curve remained, like a half of a bell mouth. The curve of a tunnel rearing above the dunes. The sand rasped. The creature sank further, retreating, turning. It became a mound cresting sand that curved away from the saddle in the dunes. Paul stepped out of the crack and watched the sand wave recede across the waste where the other thumper summoned it. Jessica followed, listening. Lump, 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 lump. Presently the sound stopped. Paul found the tube in his still suit, sipped at the reclaimed water. Now is your time to drink. Jessica focused on its action, but her mind felt blank with fatigue in the aftermath of all that terror. Has it gone for sure? She whispered. Somebody called it, Paul said. Fremen. She felt herself recovering. It was so big. Not as big as the one that got our thopter. So, the one that got the thopter they saw earlier, that was bigger. Just so you frame a reference.
Good to know.
Are you sure it's Fremen? They used a thumper. Why wouldn't they help us? Maybe they weren't helping us. Maybe they were just calling a worm. And Jessica goes, why would you call a worm? Why would you want that monstrosity to ever come near you? That was terrifying, Paul. Who would do such a thing? But the answer lay poised at the edge of his awareness, and he refused to come. Again, he's in a dark space of prescience. He has no idea what's happening, but it's there, but no. It has something to do with maker hooks, though. He knows that. Jessica asked, why would you call a worm? The breath of fear touched his mind, and he forced himself to turn away from his mother and look up the cliff. I better find a way up there before daylight, he pointed. Those poles we passed, there's more of them. She looked, followed the line in his hand, and saw the poles. Wind-scratched markers made out of the shadow of a narrow ledge. They mark our way up the cliff, Paul said. So they began to climb. Up they climb, following the guide poles until the ledge dwindled to a narrow lip at the mouth of the crevasse. Paul tipped his head to peer into the shadowed place. He felt the precarious hold his feet had on the slender edge and forced himself into slow caution. He goes down into the crevasse. His ears searched out. He could only find a tiny spill of sand, an insect burr, platters of a small running creature. He tested the darkness of the crevasse with one foot, found rock beneath it, and slowly he inched around the corner, signaling for Jessica to follow. They looked upward at the starlight framed by the two rock lips. So they're in this like bowl. Paul saw his mother beside him as a gray cloud movement. If we could only risk a light, he whispered. We have other senses than eyes, she said. Paul slid his foot forward, shifting his weight, and probed with another foot, and met an obstruction. He lifted his foot, found a step, pulled himself up onto it. He reached back, felt his mother's arm, and tugged for her to follow. They're climbing stairs. It goes all the way to the top, he thinks. Shallow and even steps, Jessica thought. Man caved. There'll be no doubt. She followed the shadowy movement of Paul's progress up the steps. Rock walls narrowed until her shoulders almost brushed them. The steps ended in a slitted defile about 20 meters long, and in the floor level, it opens up on this shallowy moonlit basin. Paul looks down and says, what a beautiful place. Jessica could only stare in the silent agreement from her position. In spite of the wariness that's affecting both of them right now, the basin has a sense of beauty that begin to fill up their senses. Paul whispers that it's like a fairyland in this desert world. Spreading out in front of her There are desert bushes, cacti, tall clumps of leaves, and all trembling in the moonlight. The ring walls were dark to her left and moon frosted on her right. So they're in a garden, a desert garden.
It's like a garden in a hole in a big rock in the desert.
Yes, nailed it.
Yeah.
This is what Paul calls a Fremen place.
Hmm.
There would have to be people for this many plants to survive, Jessica agrees. She then takes her own sip of water. But this time when she does it, she thinks how refreshed it actually kind of gets her. Like she's starting to adjust. Movement catch Paul's attention to the right and down onto the basin floor, curving out beneath him. He stared down through the smoke, bush, and weeds, and he sees something. What's he see?
Mice.
Mice. A pop, hop, hop, they went into shadows and out. Evan, do you know what mice are called in this world?
Muhadib.
Yes!
Let's go.
Did you get that the first time when you read it through?
Yes. And it is striking as we keep reading because of what happens to the mice.
Yeah. Let's see what happens to the mice.
Let's see.
Something fell soundly past their eyes and onto the mice. There came a thin screech, a flapping of wings, a ghostly gray bird lifted away from the basin and small dark shadows in his talons. So a bird came and took the mice away.
Took a mouse away.
A mouse. And it's dead now. So Jessica thinks we needed that reminder. We needed that.
Muhadib's gonna get snatched up if we ain't careful.
We ain't careful. We gotta be careful. Somebody's gonna come get us. Paul continued to stare across the basin. He looked at the bird, and he thought about the way of the desert. It had brought a stillness to the basin. So, undeterred that the blue milk moonlight almost... I don't even know what's happening here. It's flowing. Oh, sorry. So he looks down and sees the moonlight along all of these different bushes, right? There's a low humming here, a more basic in its harmony than any other music in the universe.
Yeah. I think what he's saying is like the mice were kind of like chilling. They were running around, hopping, making little mouse sounds. But in their carelessness and making little mouse sounds, a hawk came up and snatched one of them up, and then everything got really quiet because everyone remembered their place. Like, if we're too like jumping around being mice, the birds are gonna come get us, and it brought this like stillness to the whole basin. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. That's good.
Okay. Cool.
So Paul then says, we better find a place to pitch our tent. Tomorrow, we can try to find the Fremen who... Most intruders here regret finding the Fremen.
Literally, as I was reading that, I kept expecting this sort of moment to happen. Like when they were walking up and Paul like reached and grabbed his mom's arm, I kept expecting him to like grab someone else's arm, and like he's like gets the folds of her gown, but it's like some Fremen that's just like standing there watching them, But then this dude says that, and it's terrifying.
Please do not run, intruders, the voice said, as Paul made to withdraw. If you run, you'll only waste your body's water. They want us for a water of our flesh, Jessica thought. Right? That's the big fear, that the Fremen will just put you into their distilleries and take your water.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what they don't want to happen. But Jessica realizes such stealth, nobody knew that he was there. I don't think they even know where he is right now. They just know there's a voice somewhere in the place. But she realized the owner of that voice had permitted himself only the small sounds and the natural sounds of the desert. Like they thought they were walking without rhythm, being desert people. These people, they had no clue.
Right. He was just like sitting there, watching them climb up, not moving a muscle, and then speaks, you know?
Boom.
Dang.
Another voice called from the basin's rim to their left. Make it quick, Still. Get their water and let's be on our way. We've got little enough time before dawn. Bam. Second voice. There's two people here. And this one definitely says I want their water.
Right.
So,
But also, they didn't describe this voice at all. So I didn't know how to. Just a second voice.
second voice.
Is it a guy? Is it a girl? Is it a squirrely kind of sketchy voice? We don't know. It's
We don't know. Yeah, just another voice. I'm going to go with sketchy, but that's not how I read it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Paul forced himself now to obey Jessica's teachings, right? In this moment, relax. Then fall into semblance of relaxation. And then the muscles can move in any direction.
Right.
Like what we did to the Harkonnen. We did, like I was there. But like you and I, when we were with Paul and Jessica, when we were there with the Harkonnens, that like poised energy to like make a sharp movement at any point in time. Still, he felt the edge of fear within him, and he knew its source. This is blind time. No future he had seen, and they were caught between wild Fremen whose only interest was the water carried in the flesh of their two unshielded bodies.
Dum.
And we leave it at that. That ends chapter 29. We have now met Fremen. We have ran from a worm and met Fremen. If those are not deserty things, I don't know what is.
It's very, very desert vibes happening in this chapter.
Oh my gosh, so many. I love this chapter so much. Just the run from the worm is, oh my gosh, so tense. So tense.
It's crazy.
Oh gosh. All right. Well, if this chapter was your favorite moment, or if maybe your favorite moment was when Evan talked about worm poop, let us know. Make sure you go to readingdune@gmail.com, email us, send an audio recording or a video recording of you saying what your favorite moment of Dune is, and we'd love to play it on the show. As always, please stay spicy. Hit us up on the Twitters, Reading Dune, and say what's up. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, please stay spicy, and I'll see you next chapter.
Bye.